Okay, so you know how much I love diving deep into the tech world, and today uh, we're tackling something that I think a lot of us have a bit of a love-hate relationship with.
Yeah.
The iPad.
Mm.
I mean, on the one hand, it's like this amazing, sleek device, perfect for binging shows, browsing the web, even doing a little sketching with the Apple Pencil.
Right.
But when it comes to like serious work, I don't know about you, but I find myself reaching for my laptop pretty much every time. And so that got me thinking,
Yeah.
is the iPad really living up to its full potential? And so for today's deep dive, we're going to be looking at an episode from Tech Talk today called Dear Apple, the iPad Needs Help. They actually raised some really thought-provoking points about where the iPad's been and, more importantly, where it might be going.
I think it's interesting how they kick things off by, talking about how revolutionary the iPad was when it first came out back in 2010.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
was like this perfect middle ground between your phone and your laptop,
Hmm.
portable, powerful, and just so intuitive to
Yeah,
use.
it felt like magic. I remember thinking, like, this is the future. But the Tech Talk today, folks, they point out that in recent years, the iPad seems to have kind of plateaued a little bit.
Hmm.
And they suggest that maybe one of the reasons for this is this disconnect that exists between its phenomenal hardware
Hmm.
and the software that powers it, iPadOS.
Yeah, and it's crazy because Apple keeps releasing these incredible iPads, with
Yeah.
these super fast processors, gorgeous displays, and then they add all these cool accessories. You've got the Apple Pencil, the Magic Keyboard,
Right.
but it's almost like the software just isn't quite keeping pace.
Yeah. It's like they built this like supercharged race car and then they gave it like bicycle tires. You know what I mean?
Totally, totally.
So the host of Tech Talk today, he kind of digs into why this hardware-software gap is such a big deal. And their argument is that iPadOS, which is the operating system that runs on the iPad, still feels a lot like a blown-up iPhone experience.
And I think for, casual use, that's probably fine. But if you're someone who's trying to use the iPad for like, professional work, creative work, you're constantly running into these limitations.
Right, and one of the biggest things that they called out in the Tech Talk Today episode was the whole multitasking situation.
Yeah, and I think they were right to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, don't get me wrong, features like split view where you can have, two apps open side by side
Yeah.
and slide over, where you have this smaller app that kind of hovers over your main app. I mean, those are definitely steps in the right direction, but compared to what you can do on a Mac,
Right.
it's just not as smooth. It's not as intuitive.
No, it feels clunky. It feels like
Yeah.
you're playing app Tetris trying to get everything
Yeah,
to fit on the screen.
absolutely. And that's a huge frustration for anyone who's looking at the iPad as a potential laptop replacement.
Exactly. It's almost like the iPad's hardware is screaming, I can handle anything you throw at me.
Right,
But then the software's kind of whispering,
right.
like, let's not get too crazy here.
Let's take it easy.
Now, another thing that the Tech Talk Today folks brought up was the app ecosystem.
Hmm.
And they argue that this is another area where the iPad kind of stumbles a little bit.
Yeah.
There are a ton of great apps out there for the iPad.
Oh, for sure.
But the problem is that developers often seem to prioritize their iPhone or Mac versions. And so the iPad versions sometimes feel a little bit like an afterthought.
Yeah, I see what you mean. But what's really exciting to think about, though?
Yeah.
What if developers really went all in on creating these iPad-first experiences,
Yeah.
Apps that were specifically designed to leverage that big, beautiful screen, the touch interface, the Apple Pencil, like all of the things that make that iPad so unique.
Yeah, like apps that really tap into the iPad's power for things like 3D design or music production,
Yeah,
or maybe even coding.
exactly. Like imagine what that could unlock.
Yeah, that could be a total game changer. So the big question then becomes, where does the iPad go from here? And the Tech Talk Today host, he offered a few recommendations. And basically, he said that Apple needs to double down on creating a more flexible iPadOS, one that really lets you do more,
Uh-huh.
a serious upgrade to the multitasking experience so it's actually usable, and then a concerted effort to get developers excited about building these amazing iPad-specific apps.
I totally agree with all of that. And I'd even add to that, the need to blur the lines between the iPad and the Mac even further. Like, what if your iPad could seamlessly transition into like a full-blown desktop experience when you needed it?
Oh, that's interesting.
Just connect it to a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse, and boom, you've
Yeah.
got this Mac-like setup. Especially with some iPads now approaching the price of a MacBook, does that value proposition make sense if the software isn't there to back it up?
That's a really good point. So, listener, what does all this mean for you? Well, I think it means that the iPad is at this really pivotal moment. It has the potential to be so much more than just a big iPhone. But it really needs Apple to kind of step up its game if it wants to achieve that. So here's the real question for you. If you were in charge of designing the next version of iPadOS, what would be your top priority? What would make the iPad truly stand out from all the other amazing devices out there?
It's something to think about for sure.
It is. It is something to think about. Until next time,
See you then.
happy deep diving.
Bye.
Bye.